Well, joining us now is our weekly political panel. Stevie O'Brien is a senior advisor at Macmillan Vantage. She's also a former chief of staff to 3 Liberal cabinet ministers. Sean Murphy is a principal at Earnscliffe Strategies and a former senior Conservative staffer. And Anne McGrath, principal secretary to the federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh. Hello to the 3 of you.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. So listen, let's begin with this motion of non-confidence. It wasn't expected to pass, as we know, but what does it say about the vulnerability of the government's carbon policy? Because Conservatives would not be hitting on this issue time and again, and if they didn't think it was actually getting traction.
Well, I think partly it's getting traction because there was a big mistake made. I think that the carve out of the home heating oil that was very clearly quite divisive and created a lot of problems from region to region kind of put a bit of a stake in this. It put a nail in it, and it highlighted some of the discontent around it. And I think the Conservatives are seizing on that. I do think, though, that the Conservatives are very vulnerable in that they have no plan, and they have not been able to, in any way, number one, indicate that they care even all that much about climate change, or that they have any solutions to, or a plan of how to deal with it. So I think it's got vulnerabilities on both sides. This is an opposition day motion. It is. They of course, people know that it's not going to pass, but it does highlight an area where people are feeling they can identify it as part of the crunch of affordability right now, and so there are concerns about the price going up on April 1st, and it's a very, very hard policy to communicate because the rebate issue. It just doesn't fly. People don't believe that they're benefiting in any way economically from this, and so I think at a period of time when people are feeling so under the gun when it comes to prices and so forth, it's an easy one to go after. Yeah,
easy to go after. In part because when you speak to Liberals, they say, well, the issue is not the carbon tax. The issue is inflation. I don't know if that really sells to the average Canadian. How vulnerable is the policy right now, Stevie?
I don't think the vulnerability lies in the policy. The Prime Minister said, and it's true, we've run and won 3 elections on carbon pricing and climate change. So no fears that the next election is going to be run on the same thing. I think the vulnerability is really about the communication strategy around it, and I agree with Anne. It hasn't been, people are seeing it as a tax. They are not fully appreciating how the rebate piece works, that 80%...
Which is the rebrand.
Well, it's. I would say it wasn't even the rebrand. They should have been, this was always part of the package, and it just didn't get communicated in a way where people understood how it worked and how it was going to benefit them. And I think they need to double down on that, and it's going to be difficult. Poilievre has done a really good job with catchy slogans like Axe the Tax and really tapping into that affordability concerns and personal finance stress of most Canadians.
Sean, do you think a communications challenge or vulnerable?
Well, I don't think it's a communications challenge because it's. I don't know how you possibly could tell people who are having that sticker shock when they're shopping and when they're gassing up their cars that they're better off at the end of the month. You can tell them that the rebates are coming, but the numbers don't lie. And the parliamentary budget officer even mentioned it this week at the committee, saying that on balance, on average, most people are worse off at the end of the month. So this is clearly an affordability issue, and the carbon tax has a big piece to play in that. And it going up in 10 days by 23%, people are taking notice. And this motion, in particular, obviously there have been many on the carbon tax. This is an opportunity. Well, not an opportunity, but this is going to further tie the NDP to the Liberals in terms of affordability issues and this tax in particular.
Okay, which I'll get you to respond to in a second. But I wanted to pick up on Anne's point though, because despite the slogans of axing the tax, there's still the big question: what would Conservatives do? How can they keep hitting on this issue if they're not actually offering an alternative?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's for the last 8 years. It almost seems like there's been a tunnel vision in media and not you, Michael, but in Ottawa and in this country, thinking that carbon tax was the only way to reduce emissions in Canada. Whereas you look around the world, and it's not necessarily the case. Certainly to our south, President Biden doesn't think he needs a carbon tax. Now, what Poilievre has said in the past, and I suppose we'll see a lot more of that as time gets as we get closer to a federal election. But they have talked about small modular reactors, wind power, tidal power, hydrogen investments, and that's the kind of thing that they will be focusing on, I suspect. But they'll also be looking at ways to speed those kinds of processes up by reforming or eliminating the way that those projects are evaluated in the Impact Assessment Act.
And what would you say to that?
Well, first of all, I would say I find it ironic in a way because a consumer carbon price is actually a conservative idea. I mean, it was conservatives that proposed this. It's conservatives that have been the biggest champions of it. So this is a bit of a shift in many ways. So it is a conservative policy proposal. That's where it came from. I do agree that it should not be seen as the only thing in climate, doing something about the climate. And I think that the other things, like for instance, some of the things that Sean just mentioned, I think are important, but also going after some of the biggest polluters, which are industrial polluters, big oil companies, big gas companies. And I think that will also create issues for, I would say, both the Liberals and the Conservatives, who are much more tied to those big industrial polluter companies. And we've been calling for things like getting rid of the subsidies, the fossil fuel subsidies, and climate change plans that are kind of comprehensive, include caps on emissions and ending fossil fuel subsidies and making the big polluters pay.
Mm-hmm. Stevie?
Well, I think before the Conservatives can put out a credible climate policy, they probably need to get some sort of consensus amongst their own caucus that climate change is real. That would probably be a helpful first step. But beyond that, I agree that we need multiple tools in the box to fight climate change. The carbon pricing system is just one of the tools. It alone is insufficient, but it is part of the broader attack. If with everything together, all of the ambitious policies that the government's pursuing, if they were all done, we can hit our targets, and that's pretty remarkable. If we pull back from any one of the strategies that's been put forward, we won't hit our 2030 targets. So this is still an essential piece to keep in play. Okay,
an essential piece, as you say. But there was the Canadian Climate Institute, that they came out with a new report, basically saying that when you look at it, the industrial carbon tax is working really well. The consumer one is not working as well. So, given the fact that there's so much opposition and so much criticism of the carbon tax as it exists right now, can the Liberal government continue to resist either cutting it or at least changing it before the next election?
I think there's going to be an immense amount of pressure on a pause, but we've seen the Prime Minister sort of double down on it, and I don't think he can back away from his stance at this point. But I would point out as well, just my friend, that Biden doesn't have a need for a carbon tax, but I believe that's because a lot of it's happening at the state level. So,
Sean?
On the
whether or not the government can resist either changing or killing it, given the opposition around it.
I think on that they are. It is too tied to their legacy at this point and to their record from the past 8 years to backtrack on it or to axe it entirely would be a hit at their own credibility on their signature policy and on across the board really. If you're willing to backtrack on your biggest, most signature piece, then what won't you backtrack on? And further, I wouldn't trust that it would last. If they were to pause the increase, that just means that they're going to increase it later. I think right now what Canadians want to see is the carbon tax eliminated outright so that they can have some relief at the end of the month.
Okay. Can I just mention also that when they did the home heating oil thing, that was backing off their signature climate policy, and it backfired. It did not get them any of the benefits that they thought that it was going to get them, and it opened the door to some of the debate that's happening right now. So then, so backing off, they've already done it, and it's already caused them a lot of pain.
So basically, they have to keep the course.
I think they have to keep the course, but they have a hard time with it because of that carve-out.
Yeah.
It will be helpful if inflation keeps going down and we see food prices dropping like we did earlier this week, which might suggest that food prices and affordability issues are not tied to carbon pricing, but that's it'll be helpful if the economy turns around for sure to continue with the policy.
Okay, quickly, if you want one more word.
Oh, I would just say, look, it's one thing for things to appear to be going down, but they are certainly going up, or the tax is certainly going up in 9 days, and so we'll see what the effect of that is.
Okay, Stevie, Sean, Anne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.